Okay, welcome to lesson 6. Today we're going to be talking about prototypes, and prototyping isn't just about taking the next step to build something, it's really how you learn and iterate on the product or idea or solution that you have and realize the vision and the impact that the end product will have. And it's these small steps that you're taking to get there. So you want to test your prototype early and often and get a lot of feedback. And we're going to walk you through how to get that feedback, expand your network, and make sure that you're not making a huge investment as you and explore the best way to solve the problems that you're envisioning you're going to solve and the impact you want to have. So here's what we're going to cover. We're going to talk about the purpose of prototypes and the different forms. We'll also talk about some of the different methodologies, processes, and theories of action to support the way you implement your prototype. And what we want to do is make sure that you have a proper roadmap to help you structure the ideas and effectively understand whether your solution is solving the problem and just in the context of the big picture. So, a prototype is an early version of a product or service that you're imagining and putting some shape around it so that other people can react to it. Think of it as an early draft to get feedback, and your goal is to use it as a tool to refine your idea or vision or product. So, you want to figure out if it works, if you're communicating it properly, if you're missing any critical assumptions that you made just by not having it implemented or getting feedback. And so, often we're developing these ideas in isolation, and it's important to have this prototype to get feedback from potential users and customers that might give you other ideas that you didn't think about. Now, let's talk about some common pitfalls when prototyping. The first is just the lack of purpose around not only the prototype, but just forgetting why you're going through this process. Often we want to justify our idea or validate our idea on the first try, and that's not really the purpose of prototyping. It's an evolutionary process where you're constantly building and adding to your solution based off of feedback. So you'll continue to prototype new ideas along the way all the time, in fact, and that's what we call kind of the agile development cycle. The second challenge is that we often try to expand the problem to make the problem even more important than it is, and or bigger than it is, and especially in the early stages of your business, it's going to be impossible for you to solve this huge problem. Um, the third is kind of, perfectionism is kind of making it difficult for you to get to a place where you can get immediate feedback and actually learn from the feedback of others. And so you're trying to get the perfect vision and your the perfect idea on paper or in a product form, and often you'll spend a lot of time going through that process and a lot of investment of time or resources, and then realize that when you bring it out to a potential early adopter or someone to get feedback from, you'll realize that you just completely went in the wrong direction. And so again, just the agility and kind of short sprints is kind of what we're recommending. And then finally, it's especially when you're investing a lot of time and you don't have a lot of users, but also you've just invested a lot of time and have a deep understanding of the problem you're trying to solve with your solution. It's easy to get defensive. And so when you do get feedback, people sense that and often will want to just give you positive feedback. And what you really need to do is just kind of understand that you want actual critical feedback on your product or solution so that you could really see how to make improvements and go back to kind of the design elements and the purpose of what you're trying to do. I want to share with you a real story, my story of prototyping when I had started Education Elements. And back in 2010, when I was working with a foundation who was interested in a concept called blended learning at the time, provided me with a school to prototype at, because I had a lot of experience in blended learning and online learning. And so we found a KIPP school, KIPP Empower, in South Central Los Angeles. And it was a brand new school, and they got some funding, and I was brought in to help design a new instructional model based off of blended learning. And so we used a center space model, incorporating some technology and reviewing and analyzing data every day. And what resulted in, what the result was is that this school exceeded all expectations and performed exceptionally well. And by mid-year, kids were reading a year and a half ahead of where they should be, and the math scores were also a couple of years ahead of where they should be. And so it got a lot of recognition. And even when I was trying to get other KIPP schools to adopt this prototype, it was incredibly hard. There was a lot of pushback on, why it wouldn't work for them, or, they had other ideas. And what I realized is that, this prototype really worked in perfect conditions, right? It had the right leader. We hand selected the team. We had ample resources. So all of the conditions were right for this prototype to work. And it took a long time for us to figure out how to let a solution work on its own when you're really not handling every aspect of it. And so that's the big jump you need to take when you go from kind of a prototype to a full product, which is where I really learned a lot around this struggle of, like, this prototype worked really well. Why wouldn't everybody adopt it just because here's an example of it? And the prototype allows us to see if our concept works, but then also we also need to think about beyond the product, the adjacencies of change management, adoption, and education. As you can see, there are a couple different ways you could build out your prototype and share your prototype. And we're going to go through three of them. The first is the storyboard. And you often see storyboards. I mean, this is the paper form of how to design a prototype structure around a storyboard. But usually there's also a mock-up of an app, for example, that can walk you through it. And we'll talk in more detail in the next couple of slides. There's also the social media post, which is a really effective and newer way of prototyping. Social media posts also include like landing pages and Google ads and things like that. Anything that you can drive interest and test messaging, but also you could just show mock-ups of something, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And then the customized MVP, which is the minimal viable product. That's a traditional way of doing prototypes, and often we would kind of develop kind of the first draft of something, whether it's the first draft of your book or a first draft of a service that you might provide, or kind of the beta version of a product that you will develop, and you start to get people to use it, knowing that there's a lot of holes, or not all the features are complete, but you're trying to look at the process of how well people are engaged, or look at very specific problem sets, which we'll talk about in the next few slides as well.